Welcome, everyone. I'm Lillian Mills, Dean of the Texas McCombs School of Business. Thank you for joining us today for The Soul of Business, Leading with Impact and Entrepreneurial Mindset, a discussion with Brett Hurt on the future of work, corporate responsibility, and how your entrepreneurial traits can help navigate uncertain territory successfully. I'm so pleased to introduce my friend Brett Hurt. Since graduating from McCombs with a BBA in 1994, Brett has led multiple successful startups. He is currently the CEO and co-founder of Data.World, the enterprise data catalog for the modern data stack. Data.World is a certified B Corporation and a public benefit corporation home to the world's largest collaborative open data community with more than 1.6 million members, including 90% of the Fortune 500. Brett also co-founded and led Bazaar Voice to become a unicorn as its CEO through its IPO, which was named one of the top 5 by the Wall Street Journal in 2012, its follow-on offering and 2 acquisitions. Brett also founded and led Coremetrics, which was rated the #1 web analytics solution by Forrester Research, and like Bazaar Voice, expanded into a global company and leader. Coremetrics was acquired by IBM in 2010. In 2017, Brett was awarded the Best CEO Legacy Award by Austin Business Journal. He is a Henry Crown Fellow, a Braddock Scholar at the Aspen Institute. Just recently, he is the author of The Entrepreneur's Essentials, which launched on Mother's Day. And we at McCombs featured Brett in our spring 2022 issue of McCombs Magazine. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you so much, Dean. Well, it's always a pleasure. You're just such a great leader, and it's a real honor to be on here with you.
Well, we're going to talk about a wide set of questions over the next half hour. We're saving about 10 minutes for some excellent pre-submitted questions. I'll keep my eye on the live Q&A during this webinar. And we're coming out of pandemic into living in post-pandemic world. And I thought we'd start right there, Brett, about challenges and benefits of being an entrepreneur right now and how that was 3 years ago, then the last 2 years. And once you talk about that, and then we'll talk about the current market turbulence separately.
Well, thank you. I've been through a lot of downturns. I was the CEO of Coremetrics during the dot-com bust, followed by 9/11. I was the CEO of Bazaar Voice going through the Great Recession, which almost turned into a Great Depression, had it not been for some of the banks being bailed out and just all of the really, kind of unprecedented things that happened during that time. And then we had the pandemic hit with Data.World, and it was terrifying at first, both from a health perspective, because we had so little information about it. Bodies were being lined up in Italy in freezers. Wuhan was locked down, and everybody was terrified. And we saw that reaction in the stock market and with companies. And I thought this could be really, really bad. And everybody was watching that movie Contagion. Believe it or not, that was the top 10 in the top 10 movies on iTunes for about a 4-month period. And so that was terrifying everybody, because in that movie, I think it was something like 25% of people that got that disease died. Obviously, it was fictional. So it was really challenging, to say the least. And like you, I enjoy being in person with people. We're human beings, we're physical beings, and we really like that tactile sensation of looking each other in the eyes and, being able to work together. And we had to kind of, power through it. As you know, necessity is the mother of invention. And we learned how to work in a way where we bent the hospital curve to the greatest extent that we could. And we ultimately weathered through it by, at Data.World at least, focusing on industries which were not so frozen that they stopped buying anything.
Okay.
And we helped our customers become incredibly data-driven during that challenging time. And that made them much more resilient. It made them, frankly, thrive. And we became the most deployed data tool of all time, and quite a few of our customers. One of the largest consultancies in the world has over 2/3 of their people now using our platform, for example. And that enabled them to really help their customers more. So I really felt like I got a bit of a PhD in leading through a crisis through that. And now we're entering into yet another crisis because of several factors. One of them being that we've stimulated to the point, and by we, I mean the Fed and the government, has stimulated to a point where it really made the economy run white hot. And then we had fewer workers because people were coming back into the workforce. That seized up a lot of the supply chain.
Yep.
Then a war broke out that is still going on. We tend to be short-term minded sometimes in America, and there's good and bad things about that. But the bad thing is that every hour right now, there are people dying in Ukraine because of that war. And we've just had, kind of the perfect storm set up here for what'll probably be a recession for the next, year and a half, 2 years, who knows. And during that time, I will make the prediction right now, because I've seen this in the past now through several cycles, that it'll be intensely clarifying for people. Data will become even more important because, let's be honest, data is something that when you say it, people start to think about tapping the latest brainiac that they've seen and saying, hey, help me figure out what's going on here. A lot of people are intimidated by mathematics, for example. My grandfather taught mathematics at UT his entire career. And the reality is that data is just the facts about your business or your organization. It's the facts about your customers. It's the facts about your suppliers. It's the facts about all the sales trends, all the product development trends in your business. It's the facts about your employees. And if you don't have access to the facts, especially when things are really turning now into a real economic crisis, you're left bare. And, when everything's going up and to the right, almost everybody looks like a genius. And now we're going through a period and beginning a period where only the fittest will survive, and the fittest will have the biggest brains. And the collective brain of an organization is, frankly, how well they know their data, the facts about their business, and how well their people have access to those throughout the organization. So I think it'll be a period of thriving for Data.World, and we're going to do our best to help our customers with that. And as a B Corp, we give our platform away for free if people are using it for open data. We make money, in private use cases. And there are now almost 1.7 million people in that community collaborating on climate change, cancer, poverty, nutrition. We're going to see a massive uptick in community adoption during this time because it'll help people collaborate for free on things, economic related, as well as really all types of things. The Uvalde tragedy that's happened this week really hit home for us at Data.World. And we're going to put out a definitive open data collection about mental health and about the increasing amount of these tragedies, et cetera, so that hopefully lawmakers can do something besides send thoughts and prayers and actually, strike a balance with common sense gun reform, as well as, hopefully helping on the mental health side, because this is a really sad week for our nation yet again on that front.
And any more data that help us in the mental health space, Brett? It is something that takes the entire village of the globe entering information and normalizing the willingness to talk about it. So thank you for your leadership there.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I just heard you say to reinforce is when times are good, decision making based on instinct is unlikely to reveal a big problem. When times are turbulent, we need data-driven decisions, or at least data-informed decisions. And so
that's exactly right.
I think you're exactly right. The hunger for my decisions feel tougher today than they did 6 months ago. The impact of those decisions requires better foresight.
Yeah, even though you're taxpayer supported as a public university, you'll still feel the pain of this.
Sure.
And the way you'll feel the pain is that everybody will be reading about it. Everybody's watching their stock portfolios. Everybody's watching their real estate, et cetera. And they're going to see things really drop. And they've already seen things drop. And it's going to create an intensity at UT too, to say, do you really need to hire that person? Do you really need to spend this budget? And frankly, the silver lining on this is that these periods are ones where great leaders and great cultures are really formed, because it does create an intense level of focus on collaboration, which is Walter Isaacson said when he retired from the Aspen Institute. He said, out of all of these books I've written on Steve Jobs and Benjamin Franklin, Leonardo da Vinci and Michael Dell and the innovators, and on and on and on, I've learned that what these leaders really have in common, and what humanity really has to thrive, is that human beings and leaders, great leaders, are really good at collaborating. They're really good at working together. And that's what our platform's all about. I mean, some of the greatest winners during this pandemic have been Zoom, and, we're on Zoom right now. And platforms like Slack that allow you to collaborate. And Data.World is in that same genre of collaboration tools.
Well, I think you've met your fellow alum, CFO of Zoom, Kelly Steckelberg. But yeah, that was a remarkable growth in that platform over the last 2 years. Just
unbelievable. Amazing. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
My hat is off to them.
Let's pull it up to 40,000 feet and talk qualitatively. How do tough times impact company culture, Brett? Because as you alluded, you've been through some up and downs. And what leadership qualities does it take? You mentioned collaboration. Do you have others you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, collaboration is a huge one. From a leadership perspective, you have to realize that times like these are ones where everybody's looking to you to provide a sense of stability. And it is helpful that I've been through these periods, because I can tell them stories about how my prior companies, working with great teams there, thrived during these periods, although it was more trying. And it becomes, very focusing, because frankly, people start reading and hearing from their friends about layoffs. Layoffs are really ticking up in tech, hiring freezes. And what I talked about yesterday at our all hands with relation to this, we have a quarterly all hands where everybody flies in for that in our office, is I talked about, don't take this period of time for granted. We're truly fortunate to have each other, to be on the right part of the trend in terms of what people are adopting with our business and what our product does. And the more we pull together and help each other and strive to help our customers navigate this period, the more, frankly, legendary all of you will become. I mean, by legendary, what I mean by that is the stat I'm personally most proud of during the Bizarre Voice years is there's now been over 70 companies started by former Bizarre Voice people, which really creates ripple effects in capitalism and ripple effects throughout all types of nonprofits, because those people give back, ripple effects that drive the economy. I mean, the restaurants they eat at, everything else. So, the schools they decide to attend. I was just on with a former Bizarre Voice person who's now considering getting their MBA, for example. And I really encourage them to do so. So these periods are, really periods that you can choose to kind of wallow in the negativity of all and doom scroll, or you can choose to get a shovel and start building. And I'm in the get a shovel and start building business, and Dated World and Bizarre Voice and Core Metrics were frankly in the picks and shovels businesses. If you think about during the gold rush, it was the people that were selling the picks and shovels that really made the most money. But the people that did strike gold, they made more money than the picks and shovels people. But obviously that was really rare.
That's right. Well, I'm going to shift to a topic that you view with high positivity. You're known for having written an open letter to the tech industry about the importance and the benefits of diversity and equity and inclusion efforts. And you have packaged it as chapter 23 in the Entrepreneur's Essentials.
Yes.
But I want you to talk a little bit about the crucial reasons and benefits and how that has strengthened Data.World and your prior companies.
You bet. Yeah. I mean, I have the book here, and I know you've been reading it, Lil. And I made it actually the concluding chapter of my book. And by the way, all the proceeds from this book, I don't make a dime. They're all going to the Kendra Scott Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute at UT Austin, which really benefits female entrepreneurs. And as it turns out, primarily females of color are the ones raising their hands and have a lot of needs for the mentorship and everything else. And I made it the concluding chapter because the third section of my book, there's three sections. There's founding, there's building, and there's helping. And the helping section is one where I really reflect on the responsibility an entrepreneur has to pay back to society. And in the wake of George Floyd, I really started to think about my responsibilities. And I've been very educated. There's been a lot of people that have invested in me on the history of our country. And I want to be clear. I think we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. And I love capitalism. And I love the fact that we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps, defeated the biggest empire the world had ever known, and that entrepreneurial DNA is a part of us as Americans because of our forefathers in this country. But obviously, there's the historical inequities that also have been present. And that's just part of our history. There's no denying that that's part of our history. Yes, we're not responsible for what our forefathers did on the negative front, but we do benefit from what they did on the positive front. And frankly, some of us benefit more because of our race. On the economic front because of that historical inequity. So, think about what we really love as Americans. We love the diversity of our architecture, our music and food and literature and universities and cities and all of the great things that make this melting pot that we call America really work. And a company has a choice where it can be very deliberate about trying to shape itself to be more American, be more of a melting pot. And if you do that, it'll actually make your company perform better, and you'll have a heck of a lot more fun as a company because you'll have much more rich dialogues. If I just hired a bunch of white male tech guys, which I know that's the majority of who I know, because I am a white male tech guy, then it's not going to be nearly as dynamic. And I know that for a fact because this is my sixth company, and I can see how dynamic it is. And we're 59% today, either female or people of color at Data.World, and it's incredibly fun and thriving.
Right.
So I make the case for that in that chapter, and then I set up, okay, now here's how you actually do it. And one of the points I make is that if you want to create a diverse company, you need to show up at diverse places. Like when I hear CEOs say, I can't find enough female engineers, or I can't find enough, Black engineers or salespeople or whatnot, I ask them where they've been hanging out. And the reality is that you're a female. And I love the fact that you're a female as our dean. And you're going to get invited to a lot more female leadership events than I'm going to be invited to. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever been invited to a female leadership event. And so you're going to know more females. Like if I want to tap into female leaders, guess who I'm going to call? You're going to be on my list.
Yep.
If I want to tap into Black leaders, guess who I'm going to call? I'm going to call, someone like Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett, who is the CEO of Houston Tillotson and a very good friend of mine.
Yes.
So, that's just the way that society is wired. It's not a discriminatory thing. It's actually a beautiful thing that, I'm a Jewish American. I'm going to be invited to a lot more Jewish events. And it's because, we have our individual cliques and kind of labels and everything else. And we pull together to help each other. That's the basis of collaboration. So I basically lay it out in a prescriptive way if people want to go on that journey with us. And I promise you'll have a better company if you do. But it's a challenging subject to talk about because we're in yet another period of time where people are trying to wave this stuff off as wokeism and, trying to create more polarizing language and, cancel culture and whatnot. And the reality is that, there are some truths in those labels if you start to discriminate in a really oppressive way in the other direction. But there is, a really important balance here to strike in the nation that will basically create a more just and equitable society, which is what MLK was talking about in the first place.
Well, Brett, part of why I love being at UT Austin is I think the values and ethos around here is it channels optimism into our students. And I find I can get the most buy-in for seats at the table when we're growing the size of the table. And I watch this in our students because entrepreneurship is the minor that we're just seeing a crazy growth rate in at UT Austin. It's hosted largely inside McCombs. We now have 800 students from across campus in our entrepreneurship minor. John Harkey just funded the Harkey Institute for Undergraduate Entrepreneurship Studies. And then, as you mentioned, the Kendra Scott Welly, we support through McCombs a concentration in women's entrepreneurship in that minor. So I want to take that and then turn it to you to say, our students, even in turbulent times, are hopeful that Austin's and its tech hub for innovation is robust in the medium term. And I want you to talk a little bit about how Austin, Texas, and the state of Texas is growing its reputation as a draw for entrepreneurs.
Well, this is the most exciting time in the history of Austin on that front. I was born here in 1972. I just turned 50 years old. And I can tell you that when I was born, UT was thriving, the music scene was thriving. I went to the Willie Nelson picnics, but it was a pretty boring city outside of that. It was pretty small. It was the size of Anchorage, Alaska right now. It was around 170,000 people. There wasn't a lot going on. We didn't have a lot of great restaurants and whatnot. But my parents were entrepreneurs from the time I was born, and I learned a lot growing up and working with them. And there was a level of humility in Austin that I think is still pretty present, like the fact that people are really wired to help each other and not be too boisterous, et cetera. I love that spirit of Austin. So I think that character is still largely intact. From a VC perspective and a startup activity perspective, there's now a wide diversity of VCs here, everybody from Next Coast Capital and Live Oak Capital, or Live Oak Venture Partners rather, and Silverton Partners and S3 and a number of others, to private equity like Vista Equity and a number of others there. So the level of capital available is kind of unprecedented right now in Austin's history. You've had people like Joe Lonsdale move here from 8BC. You've had people like Jim Breyer, who I know has gotten very involved in UT Austin, move here with Breyer Capital. They invested a lot of money in Data.World, and Jim has been a terrific mentor to me. So you've had just a tremendous kind of windfall, like a tipping point really occur in Austin. I think what that means, even during a recessionary time, is that Austin will be fairly well insulated. We'll probably see a pretty big drop in home prices. My sister, Brandy, is one of the top 50 realtors in Austin, and she's already seen that drop, but she doesn't think it'll drop below 2019 levels, but we'll see it drop pretty significantly. But she's kind of on the front lines of seeing that data directly and experiencing it directly as one of Austin's best realtors. So, there'll be some tough, times and people will have to do some belt tightening, but I actually think it'll be a really good period for people graduating from UT if they stay in Austin. Other parts of the country will be hit much harder, but from a tech perspective, and tech also will become even more important during this time, but make sure you choose wisely, students, when you graduate, because you really need to almost forecast the trends of that business. There will be surprises. There will be a lot of unicorns that go out of business during this time. And it'll be shocking to people. I mean, it was shocking, this earlier this week when Snap lost, around 40% of its value. Right. And it's kind of signaled that the advertising market online is cratering. So there's going to be Snap's not going to go out of business, but there's going to be some really systemic shocks that surprise people. And you have to be a little bit of kind of like a futurist to forecast where you should spend your time. I do think data is going to be very resilient and thrive during this time. Yes. But there's other opinions that I have on that front. Software as a service businesses are in particular really good during these times because they're very predictable and stable from a recurring revenue perspective.
Brett, when we were talking earlier this week, I don't want to misquote your statistic, but it was about the number of businesses that formed during COVID because people were either forced out or voluntarily left employment and started their own thing. Is that something you could share about for a minute before we go to some pre-submitted questions?
Yeah, and as my good friend Chris Himes, the CEO of Indeed, says, it's not really the great resignation, it's the great realization. And the great realization is that the pandemic forced people to take a real serious look at their lives and say, am I living the life I wanted to? Am I really in a job that I absolutely love? And there were more businesses started during the pandemic as entrepreneurs than have ever been started in the history of the United States. Think about that. In 2020, there were 4.4 million new businesses started. We're investors. My wife and I have a family office called Hurt Family Investments. We're investors in companies like Everlywell, Zen Business. Zen Business has absolutely thrived during this period because of all that new business formation. They're a competitor to LegalZoom, and they do a lot more than LegalZoom. And this period of economic turmoil that now we're going to go through, after the malaise of the pandemic, it feels a little bit unfair to go through yet another turbulent period, but that is what it is. This period is one where it will create a lot of great entrepreneurs. During downturns, those are typically when the best businesses are founded. And the reason why is that only the best businesses will get funded. Because VCs, as Bill Gurley said recently, and I think he said this at UT, but I certainly heard him say this on a podcast. I know he spoke recently at UT, is that the VC industry is shaped like a sawtooth where it's risk on in a kind of a hyperbolic up and to the right, frenzy of deployment of capital and returns. And then it's a sawtooth in that it just goes completely crash and becomes risk off. And we're in a risk off period right now for the VC industry, especially in the growth VC industry, where those unicorn valuations were being printed. There were companies that had 20 million of ARR, annual recurring revenue, which got well over $1 billion valuation. And there's going to be some surprises in terms of businesses that go out of business that people thought were really strong. But again, pick well, and I will say that this is actually a good time to found a business. It's just your challenge is going to be finding capital. So what does that do to you as an entrepreneur? It forces you to bootstrap it more.
Right.
A great book. Part of the reason that I also gave my book away for free online to entrepreneurs that couldn't afford it. You can get the whole thing for free at the entrepreneursessentials.com. I hope you buy it in print, though, to benefit the Kendra Scott Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute at UT Austin. But a huge reason I gave it away for free online is because one of the first books I read as an entrepreneur was Seth Godin's The Bootstrapper's Bible. And Seth is one of the best business authors out there. And he gave it away for free online. It was his first book. And he did that because he's like, look, this is a book about bootstrapping, and you might not be able to afford to pay for the print book. So here it is.
And you talked
in
the book, Brett, about the bootstrapping. You may not grow as big or be as rich, but you get to keep being king of the enterprise. And so it really is a choice based on why did you go into business to begin with? Yeah,
you're channeling my book, Lil.
I've read almost all. Yes, it's a great book.
I love it. Yeah, so I mean that is very true. There's a chapter about should you bootstrap or VC.
Right.
This type of period for an entrepreneur is one where people do more bootstrapping than they used to during this period. But if they find a really high velocity working business model, they'd be wise. In my opinion, this is just me, because I bootstrapped and I VC, kind of fueled my businesses. If they find a really working high velocity business model, they should then raise VC capital.
Yes.
So this is a period where it'll force you to really focus on revenue early, which is frankly healthy for the business. And then, if you got a tiger by the tail, go for it, right?
Well, let's talk about downside sorts of things. We talked about positive qualities that are important to entrepreneurs. Can you caution us against qualities, thoughts, attitudes that would be toxic for an entrepreneurial mindset? What do you need defenses against?
Sure. The biggest one during a period like this is just being too fearful and letting that fear paralyze you. There's chapter 2 of my book is on the paralyzing fear of starting a new business, but that applies to times like these where they can become very, very paralyzing. And action begets action, momentum begets momentum. And as a leader, people are looking at you to lead more during these periods, not go in a bunker and, think it's not fair. We've just been through the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. Take care of your mental health. Take care of yourself too, and take the time to reflect during these periods. Chapter 14 of my book is on the qualities that get developed as you go from founder to CEO. And one of the lessons in there is that you need to take care of yourself, because you'll build a better business that way, and you'll have a better family if you have a family, and you'll certainly have better friends if you don't, during that period of time, because you'll be someone who is taking the time to let the lessons you've learned bake and kind of iterate on them. And I like to write, that's part of the way I iterate on it. A lot of people diary and stuff like that. So, I love that process because it forces me to reflect. So it's mainly driven around fear, and then, be empathetic. There's going to be a lot of economic pain out there. And especially if you're a CEO and you're in a great financial position, like, my wife and I are, you really need to be empathetic. I mean, part of what keeps us grounded is that we weren't born into it. I had $1,000 and she had $2,000 when we got married. And I met her at UT Austin as a freshman and convinced her to marry me by her senior year. And, I honestly joked with people that I'd married the older, wealthier woman because she had $1,000 more than me, and is 6 months older than me. And we've really built this as a partnership during this period of time. So it helps to go through these types of periods with a real partner. But that level of kind of where we started financially keeps us grounded. I feel like super lucky to be in the position I'm in. I don't take it for granted. I love seeing people that I work with or invest in make a lot of money and realize their dreams. It's a fantastic feeling when that happens, because I know that they're good people and I know that they'll do good things with that capital, both for their families and for the communities that they care about. So, it's you have to practice empathy. And I've seen people in times like these before kind of become a little bit more jerky, frankly, and part of that is that they're scared as a leader. A lot of times when a leader is acting like a jerk, it's because they themselves are insecure and are afraid. And if they're feeling that way, it's going to translate to the whole company. What can CEOs do that are feeling insecure? Hire a CEO coach. I've had the same CEO coach since 2008. His name is Kirk Dando. Tune into his podcast, the For You Leaders podcast. It's fantastic. Talk about a real mensch, the real deal. I mean, he's built a company to over $1 billion in revenue. And I love working with him. He helps me stay grounded too.
Well, and it's part of that theme you have in the book about having a kitchen cabinet and people to talk to and asking for help.
Absolutely.
And that gives you people to be honest with about the anxiety or the uncertainty, so that you can show up as not your fake, more confident self, but in fact, by having that support, you are more confident in the workplace.
Yeah.
You talked about the reflection time that's useful. What lessons do you have about meditation or mindfulness practices, especially given how quick the life of an entrepreneur is spinning, that it seems like that pivot is useful during the day or the week?
Yeah, well, a lot of people think I'm a meditator. I'm actually not, but I do practice an Indian philosophy called Vedanta, which is about strengthening your intellect to basically manage your brain. And what I mean by that, the brain ungoverned is like a child. It can jump between fears about the future, worries about the past, states of greed and lust. You think about some of the leaders that we put on pedestals and how sometimes they fall. And it's because they're not governing their mind during really critical periods, and so Vedanta helps me become a better leader. There's a guru that I've studied under named Swamiji Parthasarathi. And he wrote a book called Governing Business and Relationships that I think is
Okay.
one of the best business books ever written. And the chapter in there on leadership is one that I think is the best chapter on leadership that I've ever read. So I've shared things about that on my blog, lucky7.io, which I named in honor of my mom, who unfortunately passed away almost 10 years ago to this day. She passed away on May 17th, 10 years ago, and I miss her dearly. I dedicated my book to her, as well as my wife. That's why I wanted to put it out on Mother's Day, because without them, I just would not be who I am at all. They've invested so much in me. You know, I was an entrepreneur after I got married, only because my wife helped me so much with that. And if it wasn't for my mom, I wouldn't have started programming at 7, and become who I've become. And I feel really lucky. You know, that's why I could name it Lucky 7, because I had her as a mom, and because I found my passion so early. That's so hard in life sometimes to find your passion.
Well, gosh, Brett, we are running out of time, and I was going to give you, before I wrap up, any broad last takeaways you want to offer about your entrepreneurial mindset. So you get a last word, and then I get a last word.
Well, I don't want to reiterate any of the points I've made. I think I've made the points I want to make on these economic times and on leadership. One of the things I do want to say is that it's amazing what UT Austin has become. It really is. And I got to walk in my grandfather's footsteps when I came back to serve as entrepreneur in residence in that academic year, 2013 to 2014, and got to spend so much time with people like Michael Dell and Cotter Cunningham and Josh Baer, and really terrific, entrepreneurs. And during that time, I will tell you that I was absolutely inspired by how entrepreneurship really is thriving at the university. I mean, this was now, 8 years ago. So I can only imagine like how it is now internally. And it's so cool that Kendra Scott gave that gift and really created that leadership center for women, that are starting companies. We all need that help. I'm a product of many, many people that have believed in me, starting with my mom and my wife, and have invested a lot in me. I stand on the shoulders of many giants. There have been many people, male and female, that have invested their love and energy in me. And I try to honor them with this book. And I do hope people will buy it. It's written, from a deep place of love. I'm really trying to help people with it. I really feel like I've learned a thing or two, and in starting 6 businesses now over the past 26 years, and investing in 125 other businesses, and as well as 40 VC funds. So I'm trying my best to pay back and honor those that have really helped me. And a lot of the lessons in the book are frankly things I've learned from them.
Well, thank you, Brett, for taking time to be with us today. And I appreciate your friendship and all you keep doing for McCombs and UT to keep us on the cutting edge of business education. So hook 'em horns. And
hook 'em horns. Thank you so much. I'm proudly donning my UT Longhorns. Well, this is one of many. It's one of many, just to be clear.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you so much. This is an honor.
And thank you to the audience for joining.